Welcome to today's episode of More in Holistic Therapy, where we strive to provide a holistic, balanced, and unbiased approach to family messiness. Our topic today is estrangement from adult children, and we're going to be doing some grief talk. Today's guest, who is a specialist in this area, has some valuable insights to share with all of us. And we're going to learn how to improve our knowledge and empathy muscle for another's experience. And I'm so happy that Roberta Wasserman has joined us. We've become friends, and she's a licensed clinical social worker with a C on the end of it. She's a licensed therapist. She provides virtual therapy in the state of Maryland and virtual coaching universally with credentials in family estrangement coaching trained by Dr. Joshua Coleman. And she's a certified grief educator by David Kessler and fully trained in as a Gottman counselor and coach. And we're going to give you her details in the description box. So welcome, Roberta. I'm so glad you could join us today.
Thank you. This is an honor to be on your show. Thank you so much. And yes, I am glad that our paths have crossed and we are sharing in this work of helping others.
Yep, I am so happy because you've kind of helped me to realize so many things along the way in terms of all of your training about grief and how important it is to be really prepared and knowledgeable. So let's dig into it. So tell me a little bit about how you decided to become a specialist in supporting parents of estranged adult children.
Yes, well, like most therapists, I think my personal experience led the way in that I was already a therapist. I had raised my own 4 children, and the relationships, as relationships can they became messy as they grew up and went off to college and got married and had families, and grandchildren came into the picture, and I was struggling with relationships with a couple of my children, and came across a book by Dr. Josh Coleman called When Parents Hurt. And that book was so helpful to me at that time. I actually read it twice. It gave me a lot of valuable information, helped me to adjust the things that I could change. You know, as people, we can only change ourselves, we can't change others. And to work on the process of letting go of what my hopes, dreams, expectations as a parent would be once my children were raised and out in the world making their own decisions. So that was where I started. And as grandchildren came into the picture, I found myself struggling even more with in-laws, the spouses of my adult children. We weren't always seeing things eye to eye, and absolutely had challenges in how we were navigating conflict. So I experienced for the first time where there was family estrangement, where the relationships were completely cut off. There was no communication. There was, I was no longer allowed to see these beloved grandchildren, which I found was absolutely devastating. And this went on for a period of time. It was a very difficult time in my life as well. I had 2 loved ones that were battling stage 4 cancer, my mother and my spouse. So I was taxed, completely taxed, and had to start reaching out to get my own help. And um, that was a challenge. I found when it came to the grandchildren, I did connect with a woman in Florida. She goes by the name Amanda. She remains anonymous to this day, and she founded a program called Alienated Grandparents Anonymous. So that led me to be part of her support group, and I then facilitated groups in Maryland. I became a AGA facilitator in the state of Maryland, and hosted groups prior to the pandemic. My eyes were open to absolutely devastating pain, sorrow, grief, stories upon stories. I had no idea that this was something that was happening to the degree that it was happening, of broken family systems. And having been a trauma informed therapist along the way, I understood trauma as being a root issue for many, many mental health issues as well as relationship difficulties. So that gave me another lens. And I proceeded to stay connected with Dr. Coleman. In 2020, I believe I have the year correct, he did his first training of professionals. So he's in California, and in this training, there were only, I believe, there was like 5 of us across the country that participated. That was his first training. He did it with a woman from the United Kingdom that was also um, a coach and a researcher on family estrangement. Her name is Becca Bland. So I was part of that first training, and we became certified under him family estrangement coaches. And simultaneously, because of my own grief with my personal situation and with my family members battling cancer, I became a certified grief educator with David Kessler. So with those two, I just developed a passion to help others. I can say, fortunately for me, my situation has improved greatly. I do believe it's from having the understanding, education of this phenomenon, and being aware of how you can contribute, make the situation worse, or how you can things that you can do to take care to have the potential of a reconciliation in the future, and just the understanding of how our society values have changed over time, and how um, people today are less likely to stay in a relationship that's not healthy for them or doesn't feel right to them, just because it's a value of, we're blood, we're family, or honor thy mother and father, as culturally had been more prevalent in time past. So it's just a different time, a different age, and being able to grow and understand, to have the ability to navigate it myself personally and to help others. So that's my story. That's how I got involved in it. And it's definitely my passion. My heart really, really goes out to family members that are dealing with this phenomenon.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for telling us all about that. I'm fascinated. I have a question for you because I'm sure some of our listeners are in a similar boat, especially with being grandparents and then having in laws to deal with. What do you think is probably a key piece of keeping relationships with in laws intact?
I think we have to be respectful. We have to be respectful of our adult children making choices that we may not agree with, or whomever they've chosen to spend their life with might have completely different values, completely different ideas of how holidays are shared, of how family systems function or operate. They have had their own history. And so being respectful and working on having a positive relationship, focusing more on what's going right, on what we do get versus what we don't get. I don't think anybody likes to hear criticism or ways, being told ways that they're not measuring up. So being very, very aware of how we come across. So that's the parts we can look at and we can change. I mean, our adult children have chosen this person for their own reasons, and it's not our job to decide if we if they're not making a right choice. They have the right to make their own mistakes too, just as we did, right? And for some reason, they've come together with this person. So look for what could those reasons be. Try to see them as your adult child sees, and try to give them understanding and compassion that we all want, and acceptance.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also think that piece of grieving the relationship with the adult child when there is even an emotional cutoff or a cooling off of seeing each other, and there's distance created, and whether there's grandchildren or not, you're going to be grieving that that relationship isn't operating the way you want it to.
Absolutely.
And it's so hard on them. And I think it's hard on the adult children too. I'm not sure they really enjoy that either,
Absolutely.
that the
Absolutely.
distance. But do you think that there's a bit of a cultural maybe acceptance? Um, when I just want to preface this, like I do believe there are times when it's a really good idea that you distance yourself from
Mhm.
adult children, distance themselves from their parents. I
Yes.
think that that's we have to validate that from the get-go. But on the other side of it, there for parents, it just I hear them saying things like, how could they? This is terrible. I would never do this to my family. I
Right, right.
never would do this to my mom or dad. And then they'll recount how much they've gone through. Why do you think that is that we're in this boat today, 2024, with the disparity of how people see someone's choice and the way someone else is reacting to it? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, there's a lot of thoughts I have. First of all, I agree with you, and I want to clarify that my goal in helping adult parents is not to condemn adult children who have made the choice to create distance, especially when the reasons are very extreme dysfunction, addiction, mental health issues that are untreated, or putting themselves in situations that don't change. I do believe that there is a wave of this has become more accepted, and therefore almost the first line of choice versus giving it time and space to to really try other options. An example would be if as a clinician I have a couple coming to me with a marital issue, I don't right away say, okay, let's just go for divorce. Divorce becomes the last option after you've tried. So there are many, many scenarios that the estrangement has occurred without any efforts to communicate, to work through differences and conflicts, to grow, to have a growth mindset that, oh, okay, how can I grow in this conflict season? Or how can I grow in understanding I don't have to agree? I don't have to agree with my parent, or my parent doesn't have to agree with me or my lifestyle in order to understand one another and respect our differences and still have a relationship. So I do believe it's become, I hate to use the word trendy, but more acceptable for those that are participating and choosing estrangement as a first line of defense. I would like to see more and more professionals educated and aware of their support of that is contributing to the devastation of many, many adult parents who are left, truly did the best they could, because no parent is perfect. You do what you can, but don't have the ability to navigate this tremendous loss and grief. So yes, I would like to see more understanding of ways to at least let's try something else before we go to full estrangement. And we can have limited exposure, or we can have limited contact, or we can have distance for a season, not a cutoff where there's no response and you're left with the unknown. You don't know if this will ever end. you don't know. And that is devastating. That is, and most of the clients I see, they have a traumatic response to that, a traumatic reaction.
Yeah. That's so true. You know what? I think too that there are instances where the severe cutoff, I just want to keep going back there, is absolutely necessary when there's been abuse, toxic behavior that is just not changing. And in fact, we know that there are adult children, and they say it, many of them that have tried and they've given their parents the opportunity to let's go get help, or they've set boundaries and it's just been met with a lot of roadblocks or inability to kind of go there with the adult child, the defensiveness, all of those things. So
Right, right.
yeah, but I agree with you. I think it would be wonderful if we could just maybe, I'm going back in my head and I keep using this example where we used to talk about topics and it was just understood that we were going to disagree. For example,
Yes,
I don't
yes.
want to date myself, but if truth be known, when I was a kid, I like this story. It's a good one. My mom, I'd asked my mom, I said, I was curious, Mom, what party are you affiliated with? And she looked at me and I don't recall my mom ever answering me in this way. And she
Like,
said, it's none of your business. She was very like,
right,
and that was my first lesson with, oops, you don't talk about these
right.
intense things. And there was
Yes,
a lot of
yes,
wisdom in that
yes,
because you don't talk about them because people get heated. And I
yes,
think that's true also today, that sometimes it's if we're not the greatest at conflict resolution, which let's be real, conflict resolution is not simple. If you
right,
haven't been trained in it, it's not like your default setting. Your default setting is
right,
not such great behavior, right?
right,
So if you're not, then how about we don't talk about it? How about
right,
we how
right.
about we have certain things that are left unsaid, but or if we do disagree, we could just be like that respectful thing, right?
Yes, yes,
But I don't know that as a society we're learning a lot of that because
yes,
we're kind of learning like, it's okay to have vitriol against each other
right.
because you're different. So I don't know. I think a lot about this. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with you. I do know that the past couple years, the last since the pandemic, right before the pandemic, the political space and all the issues that were being arising, and then the pandemic itself, and just having two different views on the pandemic, and people just seriously just cutting off relationships because they voted differently, or because they wore a mask or not wore a mask, or these reasons where there was a complete cutoff instead of growing. And I agree with you. Conflict is part of relationships, and learning how to manage you're not going to escape conflict. Learning how to manage it is a goal, and we aren't giving very many tools to learn how to do that, right? So one of the benefits for my practice is I'm also a fully trained Gottman counselor. Well, he researched relationships 40, almost 50 years. He applied it to marriages. But I take his interventions and his wisdom, and I apply it to family estrangement. I have clients that come to me with the estrangement with an adult child and a parent, and I work with them with those same interventions. I mean, Gottman is really big on being able to understand that you don't have to agree with someone to understand them. And I even use the example with the voting. Like, you don't have to, just because someone is voting this way and your belief is this way, you don't have to cut that relationship. They're more than a vote. That
Right.
person is more than a vote, right?
Exactly.
So, but if you value the relationship, you have an option. Like you said, we don't talk about it, which was prior generations. You don't talk about religion and politics. You just don't. That's not good conversation, especially if you're not on the same page. And how do you know it if, if you bring it up and then it becomes this escalated argument? That's not good. So if you can calmly be curious about the other person's point of view and go in it with an understanding of just listening to them. What is life like for them? What is their view? What are their thoughts? And you don't have to try to change what they think. You can have your view and they can have their view, and you can
Mm,
exist. You can exist in the same you can exist in relationship if you practice those skills. And that's one of the things that I do try to teach. I also try to teach, healthy conflict resolution and working on having a positive perspective. As I said, people are more than their vote. They're more than one decision they've made in their lifetime. They're more. People are so much more. And can we have a growth mindset and see people for in their entirety instead of these things that we don't agree about? And that can cross over in so many different issues.
yeah. Yeah, I hear you. And I'm so glad you mentioned Gottman. I thought I
Yeah.
was the only one that did that.
No, no, no. I love
I
his
love
work.
I
I love it.
I love his work too, and
Yeah.
it's so important to have that kind of information as a therapist, and then it's excellent just as anyone,
Right.
to read
Right.
Gottman's books. He's got great books, and listen to his videos. He's wonderful. But Roberta, what happens though? Like you're in this boat with we're kind of talking about what to do to not get to that space, but you're in that space. Maybe you've been that parent, guilty as charged, that has wanted to say something and has said it that wasn't appropriate when there was a disagreement. And then you find yourself in this place of distance from people
Mhm.
that you adore, but it's just not, you're not connected anymore.
Right.
And then they're experiencing the traumatic response. They're having their level of grief. What are your like most critical suggestions for people in that situation, for parents or adult children that are grieving?
Well, the grief, absolutely. I feel like that is something that we resist. We resist feeling pain. I do believe that the healing can come and grief work has to come for both, for the adult child and the parent themselves, to grieve anything that you had hoped, or the desires that you wanted, or the loss that you're experiencing, and to do the grief work, to work on self-care. If someone is aware, if a parent is aware of something they said or did that contributed to the estrangement, Dr. Josh Coleman talks about writing an amends letter. And some parents like to do this, some parents don't. I don't. um I want each person to have their own agency as to whether they make that choice or not. But if you truly know and feel like it's appropriate to make amends, then clean up your side of the fence, clean up the areas that you know that you did wrong. And um Dr. Coleman makes a statement that I love. If you're to write an amends letter, say to your adult child that you know that this is the healthiest thing for them to do at this point in time. So you're really reflecting to them, you believe in them, you trust that they're making the best decision for themselves, and that they would not be doing this unless they needed to do that. So you're really reflecting positive intent. And even if you don't agree with it, you don't understand it, and you're absorbing the pain, but you reflect that to them, you take responsibility for your part, and then you let it go. Because even when we apologize, or make amends, that doesn't always restore a relationship. So then I would encourage the parent to continue to work on grieving and rebuilding their life, living their life, getting to a place where they can live their life as if this didn't happen, remembering that we were all people before we became parents. And I think some parents, yes, this being a parent can be one of the most wonderful experiences in your life. But I think some parents lose themselves in their children, and that could contribute to some of the estrangement anyway. For if an adult child is feeling smothered or feeling like they don't have their own life to live. So yes, I want the adult to continue to work on identifying who they truly are, the person they are, because that would set them up for the probability of reconciliation and for being a healthy person when that adult child is ready to reconcile, if and when that comes. They're going to be more inclined to reconcile if they don't find a parent that's blubbering all over the place and is just devastated, right? Or condemning them for what you've done. You've destroyed our family. You don't want all that, right?
Right.
You want to continue to work on that individual healing and the respect of them as a separate individual, making the best life choices they can make at this time.
Yes. I really love everything you said. I think that that's an excellent sort of prescription to start with to consider if you're grieving and things have happened. Clean up your side of the fence. Clean it up, and if you're inclined, write the letter. Although I will say some parents jump right into that step and haven't really done their homework on
Yeah,
how, but
right.
that's another conversation
Yeah, yeah,
because the letter of amends has to be really, I think, precise, not elaborate. Anyway, we'll talk about that another time. The other thing I think that you said was to show and reflect in that letter. Hey, you wouldn't, I know you haven't done this unless it was the healthiest thing
for
for
you at
you.
that.
And that
Right.
is so respectful. Really
Mhm.
hard to say to a kid when you're grieving, which is part of, I think, getting through the grief process, right? Is it's almost like the first exercise in acceptance, don't you think?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and then you also said you take responsibility and then you have to let it go, which is a really, you know, very, very challenging place to be where you
Sure.
just let it go because you do ruminate.
Right.
So I think doing the self-care where you're learning how to regulate how you're feeling, you're normalizing the grief experience, right? You're saying, oh, yes, I'm hurting and it's okay this day that I'm having a bad day. And then tomorrow you pick yourself up and you say, okay, maybe I should go to that Zumba class and I will
Right.
go, or I'm going to go for a walk. And that self-care can be in simple things. It doesn't have to be any big deal. And then you also said, which I love, is to, you weren't always a parent. You're a human. You're a person with dreams, desires, hopes, and your life must go on. I like to say you can't go down with that ship, like you still have
Right.
a life. And
Right.
I think when parents or adult children, whether they're hurting or not, and they are, because you want to be in connection, you want to belong to a family that's supportive. I mean, it's a human desire, it's mammalian, right?
Right.
We
Right.
want to belong to a group that's like
Right.
our kin. So when
Yes.
that's not happening, we're hurting. But this part of being able to move on and distinctly find yourself as a person and be okay with it,
Yes.
absolutely essential. You can do it.
Yes.
So I really appreciate that. And I know that you do a lot of work using your many um expertise. So where is that on about your group? I want you to tell me, and I'm going to have that information in the description box about your coaching support group that's coming up. So tell us about this 12-week support group.
So that's I offer them periodically, and we're finishing up one and starting another one July 8th. It'll be every other Monday night, 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's virtual, so I use Zoom, And the last one I just finished was an author, Sherry McGregor. She wrote a book, Done with the Crying. She wrote version 1 and created a 10-week workbook, and then she wrote version 2, Beyond Done with the Crying. So I used her workbook for the last one. This one I'm using Dr. Coleman's Helping Parents Heal. It's a 10-week workbook that we will be going through. So in the 12 weeks is to start an intro and then to have a follow-up, which will be right around the holidays, which can be a challenging time for a lot of the families. Once I get the group started, I will close it so it becomes a safe place for people to find healing. And I would encourage people that are dealing with this to reach out for help. And one of the things that happens when this happens to people, they go through this family estrangement and they can go into shock, but they can also have deep shame and feel like they can't tell anybody. But yet, if you take that courage, that step of courage of finding someone to tell, you're going to find you're not alone. And often when we become authentic and we share what we're really struggling with, that invites others to share too. And we have that universal connection that life is hard. If we weren't dealing with this, we'd be dealing with something else. And so for this population, family estrangement, it's their very difficult life circumstance and challenge to have to navigate, and they're not alone. And so there's a lot of healing that can come with the grief work and getting the support and being validated in your experience that you're not alone.
Yes. Oh, I love that you provide this group for individuals. And so it's 2024. So if you can't get to this group, eh, there'll be other things in the future and we'll let you
Yes.
know. Get on our mailing list because I try and alert people of opportunities like this to join a group like Roberta. So thank you so much, Roberta, for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure to have you share your expertise. And I hope if you're listening that you have absorbed all of that. We're going to leave more information on how you can contact Roberta and possibly join her group. And until the next time, we'll see you in the next video.